going to get your attention. If I haven't had a chance to meet you or chat with you today, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Deborah Johnson. I'm the communications manager at Avow, and I'm also the president for the Gulf Coast chapter PRSA. And I'm really glad you could join us. And on behalf of our board members, which I'll ask you just to raise your hand today. Since we're on a tight schedule, we're not going to go around the room and do introductions, but hopefully you had a good chance to get to meet everyone at your table. I'm very glad that we have Jim Lukaszewski with us today. He is going to be here today to offer some insight and some advice on reputation management and how to strategically respond when circumstances, in your control or not, affect you and your businesses, and you find yourself in that crisis communication zone. That's what I refer to it as. Jim is an expert on developing communication strategies for companies across the United States, and he helps them deal with high-profile situations and programs, issues. Sometimes he's called in to actually help with response. Other times, he's just a good second opinion, or maybe he's the 12th opinion, depending. He'll tell you a little more about that. Jim is a PRSA fellow and holds accreditation in public relations. He is the first member emeritus of the PRSA Board on Ethics and Professional Standards. He's also accredited in business communication and is recognized as a fellow by the International Association of Business Communicators. He's also serving as a member of their Global Communications Certification Council. So, boy, if you've got a question, he's the man. He's a teacher, he's a mentor, he travels the country to share his expertise with associations, universities, and corporations, and more. Jim traveled here today, well, actually last night, actually it was today, it was after midnight by the time we got him, from Minnesota, and he lives and works there. He's president of the Lukaszewski Group Division of Risdale Marketing. That's in St. Paul. His business began in the Twin Cities in around 1978. And in 1986, he and his wife, Barbara, moved the company to New York City, where he ran it for 30 years and grew it into an international practice. Jim's the author of hundreds of articles and manuals on crisis management, leadership, and organizational reputation recovery, 12 books. And if you didn't notice when you stopped in at our registration desk, we have 2 books out there, Lukaszewski on Crisis Management, and what your CEO needs to know. Any CEOs in the room? I knew there was at least one. So hopefully your communications professional wins that book for you, because we're going to give that away at the end. And also, why should the boss listen to you? 7 disciplines for the trusted strategic advisor. So in that case, you hope you win that, and you can hand it off to your communications managers. All right, so I'm going to, without further ado, I've been billing Jim for the year as our America's Crisis Guru, so I'm going to turn the stage over to Jim Lukaszewski. Thank you. And during the course of the program, before I get him started, if you have a question as you're engaging, I will have this fabulous microphone, so I will bring it over to you and you can ask your question. Go ahead. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. And I'm going to talk about several topics this afternoon, 3 specifically, but the session is really an open one. It's your 90 minutes, and if I talk about something or a question occurs to you, let's talk about it at the time you do it. At the end of the session, I'm going to ask you some questions, but during the session, feel free to raise your hand and ask away, okay? It's helpful for you probably to understand where I come from, in the sense that I've been doing this a long, long time, and in a lot of places, and I have developed a very specific philosophy for my work, and it's helpful if I share that with you at the beginning, so it'll make some of my comments make a little more sense. My philosophy is based primarily on one sort of very different thought for those of us in consulting. As communicators, we tend to look at communication as being, we're like, the carpenter has his hammer and his nail and his saw. We're sort of the same category. The public relations has its 14 listed things it does, and that's what we do all the time. But my philosophy over the years, because I'm always working in troubled circumstances, there are 3 ways to get to know me. This is one of the easiest ways to hear me talk. The hardest way is when something's leaking, foaming, stinking, and burning, and you have no idea what to do about it. Or maybe your reputation's on fire, or something like that. I do other kind. I write books and I do webinars and all that sort of stuff. So, but it's interesting to understand why I say the things I say. And over the years, there's a number of thoughts I'm going to share with you, but the most important one is that I've come to believe that all management problems, all management questions, all leadership problems and issues are management and leadership problems before they're any other kind of problem. Before they're any other kind of problem, they're management issues to begin with. And one of the issues we face in our profession is we are so bound up with the news media and social media and all this communication stuff that's almost always what we begin with. And I don't know about, you can raise your hands, but I don't think, I've never had a client or a boss in my life whoever thought he or she was a bad communicator. Anybody got one? In fact, it's just the reverse. No, you talk to people as to why they got the jobs they have, quite often they'll say, because I'm a good communicator. And in fact, the higher they go in the hierarchy of management, the more enthusiastic about saying how really good they are as communicators. So my message to you today is, if communication is all you got, then, they learned our menu of 14 things the first month they got their management job. So they know what we're going to say. So part of what I'm talking about here is looking at another way to do your job and think about yourselves from the very beginning, regardless of which supervisory kind of level you're advising in what you do every single day. The second chunk of my philosophy is that if it's a management problem, it's also a leadership problem. Managing is about leading. And we talk and live this profession of ours day in and day out. I guarantee you, when a manager or leader has a problem, he's not going home and reading a book about media relations. He goes home and reads a book about leaders and how they solve similar problems. The question you have to ask yourself is, what do you study? It takes a lot of guts to walk in an operating person's office and give them advice when you have no clue about what they do every day or how they do it every day. And leadership and management are big deals. If you're not studying leadership, you're not being as helpful as you could be. You're not being as important as you could be. One of the reasons they often fail to listen to us is because we only have the lexicon of media relations and all these other things. We fail to learn their lexicon. Management problem first, leadership problem second, and third, if it's those two items, then it's also a followership problem. The only reason you get to lead is because there's people behind you doing what they're supposed to be doing. You got to think about issues and questions that affect organizations from their perspective. It's more than putting yourself in their shoes. We probably can't really viably do that, but we can learn about these things and have much more powerful impact on people who run things. You ever wonder why they don't listen to us? This is part of the reason. If it's, I think that I have two more elements of my philosophy. Staff functions, we're all staff people, except those who are operators today. There's some operating people here. And staff functions exist to help the people who run the place do the job better. It's their bus, so to speak. One of the most frequent questions I get, because I've been in this business so long, is, Jim, I work for a guy, he's very talented. I've been with him 6 or 7 years. I trust him, he's an honorable guy. But there are things he should be doing that he's not doing. And I just can't convince him to do these things. What do you do? What is the secret? You're the guru here. What's the secret to making these people do things that we think they should be doing? I said, well, how long have you been bugging them about doing something? Well, I've got one thing I've been bugging them for since I came. 6 years. I said, well, I have a rule, a 10-day rule on ideas. If he doesn't do it in 10 days, forget about it and find another one. Just drop it. If they don't do it in 10 days, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. It's their bus. They get to choose. Now, if it's immoral, illegal, monumentally stupid, and unethical, then it's not about convincing him or her to do something. It's about you finding another place to work. Because these behaviors do not change. Even when they get arrested, and I've been there for some of those circumstances, they still do not change. Got to be realistic about how people run the world, who get to run it. It's their bus. You don't like their bus? Get off it. There's plenty of other buses around. And many of us just start our own bus, and you can do that too. It really kind of settles you down if you think about it in those terms, instead of agonizing over something that we think they should be doing. We serve at their pleasure. We justify our existence in so many different ways, which make absolutely no sense whatsoever. The real issue for us and the people we advise is, are we helping them make progress in their jobs every single day in some way? Same is true with, the reason I can say this is because we're the one profession, I work with all staff functions, including lawyers. We're the one function that does the thing we do almost every day is throw ideas away, every one of us. We're creative people. If you've been around for a while, you don't even write this stuff down anymore. There's too many of them. So there's always some idea to follow the idea that can't be done by somebody. Forget about it, have a happier life, and be less of a pain in the you-know-where. Because, oh no, you're going to talk about that again. She talked about it every Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon during our first meeting. Right? The other advice I would give in terms of because we think of so many ideas, when we're walking and talking and thinking with people who run things, I always like to try and get you to put the brakes on making suggestions. I have a little set of rules about giving advice and sharing ideas. There are really 5 questions you have to ask. One is what I'm about to suggest going to help him or her, fulfill their leadership role today in some respect? Does it really fit what they wanted to get done? Secondly, does it also help the organization accomplish the organization's goals in some way today? Third question is, if the answer to 1 and 2 is yes, is it really necessary anyway? Third, or fourth, I guess that's fourth, does it save money, make money, those sorts of questions. But the last question is the toughest. What will fail? What will not succeed or progress if I don't make this recommendation? Part of the issue in advising senior leadership is to say things that matter every time. This is one of the ways that you say things that matter. We're just great shipshooters. You ask a question, we got 5 ways to fix that problem. And the difficulty is that, managers and leaders don't really understand how we think. We're really anomalies in their business when you think about it. I see there's an easel here presented for me. So this is the one picture I draw. If you understand how people who run things think, this is how their brain operates. I call it linear thinking. Now, it's not judgmental, it's just a label, okay? And basically, when you run things, what you learn is that you have to have a process. Remember that word, process, for making progress. Okay? So if you work for like an engineer, this would be a perfect example. Okay, here's the problem, whatever it is, and then they automatically and just intuitively begin dividing that problem up into chunks and pieces. Okay, and they work on these individually, and then this arrow going down on the right is time. What they've learned is when you manage things that over time you can mix and match and mess these things up, get rid of some and that sort of stuff, and you will come up after a certain length of time with, better questions, better answers, important, helpful ideas. But the point I'm making is it's a process that they've learned how to execute on all of these circumstances. Now, I've known all of you for 35 minutes, so let me draw a picture of your brain, okay? our brain. This is our brain, and in our brains we have floating around a lot of stuff. Probably the metaphor is wastebasket, okay? Our brains are just full of stuff. And if you're a former journalist, many of you are, this is your brain too, think about it. And, you know, they're just floating there. And this is interesting, you know, let's say that this is 1 year experience, 2 year experience, 3 year experience, 4 years experience, all this stuff piling up in there. I mean, you know, most of us actually, well, it's probably changing to some degree, but you know, we read stuff, we see a magazine and we see an article we want to do something about, we tear the page out and put it in a pile of other pages we're going to read sometime in our careers, true? Most of you have a box full of this stuff sitting somewhere. At 4.5 years, if you're a journalist, you quit journalism, become a PR person, and the process continues. Okay? What triggers us is not so much a problem as it is a deadline to get something done. So you can talk to your blue, you know, about building a building or expanding something or starting a whole new strategy of some kind. But for us to be activated, someone has to say, by June 1st at 4 p.m., all of a sudden, bam, our brain goes in the, you know, and all of this stuff comes down here, and we have stuff. Drives people who run things for processes totally crazy. Like, wait a minute, going to take us 4 years to do this, and your question is, you know, when are we going to make the announcement? Come on, we've got 4 years of work to get done. What you learn in working with people like us is, if you operate things, is if it has 4 years, we get real busy, you know, in the 11th month of the 3rd year. True? Doesn't matter. We don't care how you build it, really. We don't, all this other, okay. So, and the problem this presents to people we work for is that, you know, part of this process here is data gathering. Adding, you know, putting facts in place that influence how we change the thing around. That's why I call it a process. In this case, oftentimes we can't explain ideas which actually people like. That's what they pay us for. When they really, and where did that come from? You know, it's a total mystery, okay? So the thing you have to think about to help yourselves, I wrote a book about it, is how we give advice to people. I talked about how you limit the suggestions you make. The issue for us is to think about ways to translate this into some kind of a process that helps you have more impact, that helps people have a better time at describing and talking about what we do. So I'll just briefly talk about this process, because I want to move on to something else. But I call this essentially, you know, and this is actually one of my philosophies, is we think we're paid to solve problems. And the reality is, almost no step function can solve a management problem. The reason we can't is because we don't know enough about the business we're in to solve a problem, literally solve a problem. We're PR people. We don't know much about anything, or we know a little bit about a lot of stuff. You know, and 84% of us cannot add, subtract, multiply, or divide reliably. But everybody we work for can. This is a tough problem. So the issue for us is, how do we take this process, this charmingly intuitive process, this is the intuitive thinker, and make this into a process? And so what I say is, rather than be a problem solver, which is impossible for most of us, is to become an option provider. An option provider. Tiny ideas that you know will work when you suggest them. And it's kind of, I'll just walk quickly through the 6 steps for you, because it's interesting to think about. It's a 6-step process. I call it the 3-minute drill. And I'll walk it through in terms of words and time so you see what this is about, okay? So, you know, the first thing we do when someone asks for advice is, or we're called to the boss's office, is, you know, we walk in and we start talking like right away with what we know. But I want you to think about structuring what you're going to talk about in this fashion. When you are making your presentation, or you're going to suggest an idea, you divide your process, your concept into 6 parts. Sounds like a lot, but you know. The first step in the process is what I call introduction. Introduction. Talk about what you're going to talk about. Why? Because his or her day is completely different from ours. We bounce from idea to that sort of thing. Most executives are busy in meetings all day, making decisions, seeing presentations, discussing things with people. It's relatively well organized for many of them. Many is not, but nonetheless. But we walk in with our bright-eyed, bushy-eyed stuff, and we just start talking. It's always helpful to introduce yourself and what you're talking about, because these people's brains are someplace else. Why not give it 60 words, 60 words, and explain what we're meeting about? Give them a chance to kind of like, you know, get off of the guy from HR who's got a big problem and get back onto our problem, which is maybe not that big just yet, but who knows, okay? 60 words, introduce the topic. And the metric here is that in English-speaking cultures, we speak approximately 150 words per minute. I lived in New York for 30 years. My mother swears that, you know, the velocity of my language went from 150 to 300 words a minute living there, but that's another story. So 60 words is just under 30 seconds, okay? Step 2, explain it. Really, I call this analysis, okay? Why are we talking about this? Why does it matter? What's the urgency? What's the opportunity? What is the threat? Why am I taking your time, even a brief amount of time, talking about this? 60 words again. The third step is what I call the goal step, G-O-A-L. You know, you're all used to this. The moment you begin speaking, you know, the boss is getting out his phone and all these sorts of things because he's really busy and that sort of thing. And whatever you're going to say, he wants to know what the endpoint's going to be right then. We're not even a minute into talking to them. He wants to know what's going to be the difference. 60 words on what's going to be different when we're done talking. What I've learned over the years is, you know, if they're going to refuse or not approve the idea we described in 20 minutes, they're not going to approve it at 2 minutes. Why not save them 18 minutes and move on, okay? The fourth step is really this is the money step, this is the option step. You get a full minute, 150 words for options, and here's how it works. When you give advice, you want to always make 3 suggestions. 3 suggestions. The 3 suggestions are these: doing nothing, doing something, and doing something more. Doing nothing I call the 0% solution. Doing something is the 100% solution. Doing something more is the 125% solution. And the reason is this. Most of the reasons that we lose arguments is because as creative people, we really love what we create. And so, you know, we only offer one option. And in most organizations of any size, the moment we offer a single option, this automatic cultural process goes into gear called death by question. It's usually like the HR person will speak up first. Jim, there you go again. You know, you're really good at these ideas, but you know, this one has people in it. You got to talk to me about people before you sit in a management meeting and just drop these things on the table. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with firearms, but that's a .22. It's a very small bullet, okay? You're probably bleeding, but you're still standing, okay? But you've been hit by something, okay? But then the finance guy opens his mouth. Jim, you know, everything you propose has all these zeros in it. If it's got zeros, Jim, talk to me before anybody else. Well, zeros, I mean, finance, that's like a .45. It's a much bigger bullet. You know, it really leaves a bit. You might actually be down with this one. You're definitely bleeding. You're definitely hurting, okay? And then the boss comes along, your pal, and says, you know, I cut your budget 13% last year. I'm not through cutting it this year. And I have a question for you. I like the idea. I think it's really cool. You come up with good stuff. But here's my question. Could you do everything you did this year, plus the idea you just proposed, on a budget that's 25% less next year. Well, now you're a bloody mess on the floor, right? The reason you always offer 3 suggestions is because they can't shoot you down on all 3. It's pretty hard. And it also goes to the fact of why you're in the room in the first place. So many of us are in that room because we're going to get a good communications result by the time we're done. So help me, whatever, okay? No, no, no. You're not in the room for that purpose. In my judgment, I don't, I say I don't care if they take my advice. I really do care. But what I've learned over the years is that it's the process of making decisions at these levels that's so interesting. You want to be there to see how it works, not just walk out with a trophy or a feather in your cap, so to speak. If you really want to be serious about this and be helpful, you got to be interested in the whole process and everybody's point of view. And the fact that your ideas are going to be changed. Everybody's ideas get changed. That's the real value of our being there, is learning about how these people think. I view myself actually more as a management anthropologist than a communicator. I'm interested in how they make decisions. And most of the time I'm there because somebody did something really stupid and sometimes really dangerous. I want to know how they get there. So the 3-option process allows you to be in the game for as long as you care to be in the game and not be kicked out at the first. If you kicked out on the first thing, they don't invite you back. They invite you back when they decided what you're going to say and when you're going to say it. I want to be there before I watch all that happen. Oh, there are 2 more steps. When you make 3 recommendations, it's sort of logical that maybe rather than choose one of the 3 right off the bat, the boss is likely to say, well, if you were in my shoes, without my bonuses, perks, and all the rest of it, which one would you suggest? It's interesting. I've watched tremendously interesting advice being given, and when you get to that point, the person giving the advice says, yeah, I haven't thought about that. What? You haven't thought about it? Why are you wasting our time? The 5th step is the recommendation step. Choose one of the 3 and be prepared to propose it. I think the boss will make up his or her own mind, whatever you propose. But they're interested. It's the way they learn from you. 60 words again. If I were you, here's what I'd do. The other question that is analogous to this one is when the person you're advising says, what do I do first? Same question. What do I do first? So many of us are not prepared to say or to know what to do first. Sometimes it's a simple thing. Just pick up the phone and call. Especially in today's world. There's so many ways to avoid communicating directly. In the crisis business, speed beats smart every time. Pick up the phone, forget the email. Pick up the phone, forget the news accounts. Pick up the phone and talk. So that leads to one other possible 6th step, and that is what I call the justification step. If you got a real process thinker for a boss, he's going to say, well, Jim, for just a second, humor me here, but why did you choose A over B and C? Walk me through that, okay? So be ready. 6 steps. If you add up the minutes, they come to 450 minutes. That's 3 minutes. It's a 3-minute drill. You can do this. And your life will change. People will listen to you more. Because any person, any individual, regardless of their station, if they can come up with 3 sort of sensible options for someone to choose from, that's a very valuable person. Because most every staff function is busy grinding their own axe about whatever they got to get done. I understand that. But I'm saying, we have the opportunity to have a higher level of function, a higher level of impact. Because unlike other functions, I'm involved in a lot of legal stuff. I'm not a lawyer, but I have a very robust, I guess you would say, civil and criminal practice. And it's always interesting to watch the lawyers try to draw the drawstring around everything you do, especially communicators, because what they learn is we know everything. We're just crazily curious about everything going on. You really can't segment things away from us. I'm saying leverage this curiosity that we have productively into a process like we're talking about here, okay? I'm just talking about my philosophy of doing this kind of work. But very interesting. And if you look at and talk about how I'm thinking here, I'm putting myself in their position at every opportunity. I'm less interested in the communication solution, and I got some cool ones, as do you. But I want to make sure it is a place to land that they can see the value of as we go through the process. Something to think about. And sort of my final fundamental philosophy is that the main difference between staff functions and management functions are these. It's the leaders and managers who take the jobs to make the decisions that move the organization forward. So having this incremental approach, having this options approach, gives them ingredients for their own decision making. And when you start doing this, people will recognize its value and that you're thinking more from their perspective than you're thinking from the perspective of the communications function or as a communicator. It's a very powerful way to do things. It's a discipline, one of the most, I think, important disciplines of what we do. And I have in addition to my philosophy, I sort of make some assumptions about what we do as advisors. I believe, we're always talking about one of our favorite subjects is how do we get to the table? And I do a lot of work with operating people, and they're always asking me, where is this table all of my staff people are talking about? Is it anywhere near my office? And if I find it, do I have to go there? And if I go there, who am I going to see besides the same whiny staff people I see every day from 9 to 5? To make this really work for you, you have to believe in yourself. You're the table. When you're in the room, you're the person for communications and the other things that you bring to the table, so to speak. When I'm in the room, when the lawyer says, Jim, I don't know much about communications, I sort of say, let's stop right there, okay? You do all the communication will work out just fine, okay? You're the table. You have to think about it from this, there is no table. And the table's very movable. I mean, if you go to a meeting where there's lots of people, you go to meetings like that, what happens at the end of the meeting? The meeting breaks up, the boss is finished, he walks out of the room, but he sees Russell here and he says, Russ, you got a minute? Hang back, will you? So he looks at Mary, just take a second, will you? Now that's where the real meeting is going to take place, after you spend an hour and 15 minutes with all these people hanging around. Leaders don't make decisions in gangs. Actually, they have gang meetings to satisfy the hunger of gangs, not to make decisions. They've chosen the people that help them make decisions. And it's often based on these kinds of things that we do for them that really are helpful. Even if they don't appear to take our advice, they are informed by it. You'd be surprised when you make a sensible suggestion, how it gets done. I mean, when I'm in these meetings, my brain is constantly asking me, is what you're about to say, does this really matter to anybody? Does it have any influence on anybody in this room? If it doesn't have, better think about something else to say. I can't tell you how many meetings I'm asking, because the crisis of business is a victim business. Who's talking to the victims' families? Duh. Who's at the hospital? You'll hear when I talk about crisis a little bit this afternoon. The bosses in crisis have two responsibilities. The first one is to set the moral tone for the response. Because if you get hacked off in the first 15 minutes, funny thing about that, everybody gets hacked off for the rest of the day. And senior leadership are the only people who can answer the questions that are always go on with emergencies and crises. You're going to pay for the cost of this, you're going to cover these expenses, you're going to help these families out. None of us have the pay grade to make those decisions. These people do. Besides, it keeps them out of our crisis management center and lets us do our jobs at the same time. you think these things through, as I'm talking about, this all makes, in a sense, great sense. But in terms of making recommendations, I also, remember I said the first one is doing nothing. I'd like to be the one who talks about doing nothing. Because I've been down this road. If the lawyers talk about doing nothing, we'll do nothing, for sure, first. I mean, I've been at meetings, like in Hawaii, come there for just one afternoon, and the meeting is over in 15 minutes because the lawyers decide to do nothing, so I fly home. I mean, it's a nice trip, but, so I want to, we're the only ones, I think, on the entire management team who really understand the cost of doing nothing. There is a cost. I want to have that discussion because doing nothing is a legitimate strategic approach to many problems. In my experience, almost half the time, doing nothing is the best option, at least for a little while. Mostly because in crisis, you know so little for so long, we start making big decisions and we compound the problem. Pick up the phone. No. Okay, so you're the I call this the yo-yo factor of your life. When you are the person for things, you're basically alone. I call that the yo-yo factor. You're on your own because you are. Decisions are not made in groups; they're made by informed people. Okay. So let me start by. I'm going to just move away from another topic. This is a story about a very famous company in the medical products business. And it's a true story. All my stories are true. A friend of mine had a nice little agency out in New Jersey, worked for this medical products company, he did their product publicity, loved the thing. He talked to patients and doctors and all kinds of stuff. And then one day he's visiting a plant, one of their manufacturing plants near Boston, and he's there about 10 minutes, and all of a sudden the doors bang open, and guys walk into the building with shotguns in their hands, blue jackets that say FBI on the back, and they're there to confiscate records and some other stuff. So he called me. He said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm in Boston, and there's a bunch of guys with shotguns and FBI on the back of the jacket, and something bad has happened in this company. You like this stuff, Lukaszewski. You want to talk to him? I hate this stuff. I don't want to be around it. So 2 days later, I was at their company headquarters in New Jersey and talking to their chief operating people to begin with. And that's where I met a guy named George White. George White was the CEO of the company. He had come to the company just out of college, went into their sales and marketing department, was there for 18 years, and on the 18th year, he was, by that time, Senior Vice President for Sales and Marketing, and they made him the CEO of the company. I met him 14 years after that. And the reason we met was because he was about to be indicted by a federal grand jury in Boston for illegally altering medical products. He explained to me that he was being indicted for show. The Justice Department always tries to indict the CEO in these matters because it makes better press and it sends a message out of the CEOs, we can get you too. Okay. 6 other employees were indicted. The feds actually raided two other facilities. The cause of the raids was because several patients had died, and a couple of dozen more had been injured, and they laid it out of the product this company made. It's a catheter. You know what a catheter is? It's a catheter product, very famous one. And it was reported to the FDA. And upon analysis, the FDA discovered that these products had been altered. They did not meet the specifications that were approved by the Federal Food and Drug Act. 6 other employees were indicted, as I mentioned. And I was being interviewed when I talked to the company about working with them, resolving these problems. So after I met with the CEO, which is actually, it wasn't the last time I talked to him, the second last time I talked to him, I met with a committee of the board, a special committee. This is a criminal matter. So life changes in corporations when it's a criminal matter. Everybody got an attorney, can't talk to people. They knew they needed some help to get this done. Whenever I'm in these situations, especially criminal situations, no matter how famous the company is, you never know really what you're dealing with. So I'm really interviewing them as hard as they're interviewing me to figure out if this is going to work out. But they hired some law firms I respected and knew, and so I agreed to work for them. The next time I saw George, he had just returned from Boston, where he was indicted. And he was in his office, and I was walking by and I saw him in there, and he was loading boxes up because it's a Delaware corporation, and it's true in other states too. In Delaware, if you're indicted, if you're involved in a criminal process, you cannot be at the moment an active officer of any public organization. So he was packing his duds up to move to an office at a shopping center a couple blocks away. He couldn't be there, so I offered to help him, with the boxes. So we walked down to his car, and I asked him, I said, George, how did it go? What was the indictment thing like? Now, this is the head of a Fortune 500 company. He said, well, my lawyer did me a favor. They got the Justice Department to allow me to surrender myself in Boston. Otherwise, you would have been arrested on the street. Just send out a bulletin or whatever they do, issue a warrant, and the cops find them and pick them up. So he said, I surrendered myself as I was supposed to do, and they strip searched me, photographed me, fingerprinted me, put me in an orange jumpsuit with prisoner on the back in big letters. And there were 31 others to be indicted that day, and I was manacled to the last in line and put in a huge holding cell. It was the last time he'd flown anywhere on a corporate jet, as a matter of fact. Not that that matters, okay? He was arraigned. He was the last arraignment of the day. They kept him there the entire day. He got there at 9:30. Another message being sent about being a CEO of a criminal company. And in fact, he did fly home on a commercial jet. He couldn't fly in corporate equipment anymore, so to speak. His career was starting to decompose. But the conversation we had at the car was so interesting. As we're putting the boxes in the car, the boxes in the car, he says, I'm so relieved to finally be indicted. I mean, it took 2 years. And I said, George, what could you possibly be relieved about? He said, well, all I've done for all these years, even when I was sales manager, I just, people asked for money, I wrote checks to people for all kinds of stuff. He said, I never helped anybody. I just busy doing my work. Nose to the grindstone. But now I've got some time on my hands. I can really roll up my sleeves and help some of these organizations. I said, George, you, Marie, his wife, and I are meeting in your new offices tomorrow morning. You're going to call every one of these organizations and resign. They can't afford to have a putative felon around. Not possible. I think that might have been the moment when I think he began to really realize. I said, George, you're going to be spending time staying out of jail. That's your life for the foreseeable future. I think, I think that's when I saw the tears for the first time. I think he's beginning to suddenly realize this is not a fairy tale going on. This is really something serious happening to him. The legal process lasted 6 years. It really was, and I do this a fair amount, so when I say it was a really typical corporate scenario of this kind of behavior. There was mismanagement. There were bad decisions. There were people who ignored their ethical principles and legal restrictions. They obeyed questionable orders and decisions by others in the organization. They disregarded the rules and regulations that prohibited, in this case, altering any of these products without actually putting a brand new drug, a brand new device application. The tragedy of this company, Fortune 500 company, began not in the mailroom, began in the boardroom. These are all very smart people. one of the lessons I've learned in this work is, these kinds of circumstances happen they may actually start like this one did in the field, but ultimately the pushback and the problems came in two forms. One was when it was reported up the chain, it wasn't reported all the way up the chain. It got stopped. But the more interesting thing is how it got started. One of these senior people, in a moment of whatever the moments these people have, where he's panicked by the competition, some circumstance, he called his team together and uttered that fateful phrase, "Do whatever it takes to keep the patients happy, the customers coming, and the product rolling off the assembly line." Whenever I hear that phrase, I'm looking around to see if the guys with the jackets and shotguns are coming, because they might well be. It was a very interesting experience that entire time. It's still, I think, is the largest product adulteration case in the history of the FDA. And interestingly enough, I got to attend much of the trial, which was held in Boston. And about halfway through the trial lasted about 7 weeks, the judge asked the prosecution, "When is this man going to testify?" They pointed to George, because he's sitting there the whole time. And the prosecution said, "Well, Judge, we're not ready to put him on the stand just yet." And the judge said, "Well, how about this afternoon?" And the prosecution said, "We're just not ready, Your Honor." And he looked at him and said, "George, you can go home. You're done." He was acquitted from the bench. He flew home on a commercial air line, and he retired that afternoon from the company. Very interesting. I got to help draft the elocution. If you watch Law and Order, the elocution is, when the perpetrator takes the plea, he has to stand up, or she has to stand up in court and say what they did with some specificity, so the judge is satisfied that they understand what they did. And I got to write most of that. It was kind of interesting. They had a new president by that time, and he wasn't happy, but that's another story. He never liked me. It's about 2,000 words, and first we spoke, and then before the judge approved the plea, the families got to speak. 6.5 hours of some of the most heartrending stories you want to hear. Unforgettable when these things occur. In any event, they accepted the plea. The 6 other people over time were convicted as well. But it was interesting to read some of the documents in the case. The FDA, as well as the Justice Department, had this recurring phrase: the company culture valued profits over human life. Just think about this. Work for a company where, the company's been under supervision for 4 years, which is usually an attempt to kill the company, but this is a good company. They survived today. They're doing handsomely. The board did a lot of interesting things to solve the problem. We had a meeting at the end of this case, on the day that the case concluded, when they signed the plea agreement, actually. We actually went back to New Jersey, and they had brought in every manager and supervisor from around the world. They have 8,000 employees. They brought in about 800 people to hear the plea agreement read out loud. The reason we did that was because the company did not believe as a whole that this ever happened. They couldn't believe the company they worked for did something that killed people. I mean, I don't know, they had some 250 physicians on staff. Couldn't believe it. We read the plea agreement out loud, asked for questions, and the first question from this audience was, "Okay, that's the government story, now tell us what really happened." If you know anything about the law, the plea agreement is what happened. There's a little fine print in there that says, if you know information that the government should know about that isn't in this plea agreement, you are obligated under criminal penalties to report it immediately. So we read that little language there and paused and asked does anyone have any information that we haven't talked about in this agreement. Failure to report it might mean that the case would start up again, but people still had great difficulty understanding that a company this good could do something this terrifyingly bad. Kind of interesting, though. that meeting was over, and so all the consultants were there too. And so the president of the company, yet another president of the company, was just busy handing out bouquets to people. You know, the law firm did well, blah, 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 blah. And he kept ignoring me. And so finally, I mean, it's pretty obvious the only person he hadn't talked about in the room is me. And not surprisingly, he looks at me and says, Jim, he said, and then there's Jim Lukaszewski. He says, Jim, you know, whenever you're around, it feels a little bit like Sunday school. And I said, well, Tom, if my company had just pled guilty to 371 felonies, a little Sunday school might help, don't you think? Everybody laughed but Tom. Okay? But he only lasted 7 more weeks. There was a new president. I still do occasionally projects for the company. But the thing that I learned in this process, the benefit of this particular case was we did so much study of what went on. And, you know, there's some powerful lessons here. And the reason I'm talking about this is, you know, does Volkswagen come to mind? This is a direct parallel to Volkswagen. It's parallel in some eerie way. I'll just mention one. There were no whistleblowers in this case I'm talking to you about. You know what that means? Everybody's in on it. Everybody who matters knows what's going on. There are no whistleblowers in the VW case. Why? Because everybody's in on it. Interesting enough. But here are the things that are so interesting. Ethical problems in organizations always start near the top of an organization. They be triggered at lower levels, but they get jammed at the top. Which is why you see in these circumstances so many times senior executives get fired along with their management teams. You know, ethics violations are rarely the fault of junior people. You got to have some power and sophistication to carry these matters off. It's somebody you trust who gets these things started. I've said this already, you know, but it's the smart people who do this. It doesn't happen, you know, where the mechanics fix the delivery trucks. It happens up top. The most powerful enabler for this kind of behavior in every circumstance is silence. The unwillingness of people to step up and say, what are you doing here? Now here's the interesting thing about senior people. When you get a senior job, a top job, and if you haven't had one before, one of the really creepy things about these jobs is one day you wake up and notice that just about everybody is watching you all the time. Walk in a room, people are watching you. Sit in a meeting, people are, what's he doing? They're watching. There are people in the organization who watch and count what senior people do. Sometimes they write it down. So when, you know, they're talking about somebody, you know, whether it's a meeting or whether it's just a coffee clutch or something, you know, somebody steps forward and says, well, you know, I kind of pay attention to him. You know, a couple of things he does this right now, they're kind of interesting. Want to hear? Of course you do. It's a little creepy. And here's the point. 2 things. Whenever there's a bad decision like this made, there's almost always a PR person present. Lawyers probably, but PR people. In my experience, only 3 PR people do I know actually went to prison. It had nothing to do with this. It was their own behavior. That's something there. And in other words, people know. When bad things get done in an organization, people know. Somebody knows. Because no senior person acts in private. Nothing is private. There's nothing more exposed than people at this level. And they're exposed to us. And many of us know these things. Something to think about. I think also, you know, we studied this case, as I mentioned, very heavily. And I've been working in the ethics field for more than 20 years. And, you know, it's interesting to me, I break down ethical behavior into sort of 2 categories. From age 19 to 26, roughly, this is the years of certainty. In this age range, you know everything. Your parents know nothing, teachers know nothing. What you know is what you know. And I know this because we spend a lot of time teaching ethics to young practitioners. The thing that was interesting about this particular case was how it illustrated the problems faced by the executives in that up-and-coming range from about age 30 to 49, when your career takes off, and you suddenly spend sometimes a little time almost every week making compromises to things you believed very firmly in the past. I call it incremental de-ethicization. Okay? It happens over the course of a career. It's everything from who you supervise and how people survive to where you live, maybe in your business. The executives to get to the highest levels have to live in 3 different markets or manage 3 different countries and stuff. All these things pose ethical problems. All of which come from the top of the organization, interesting enough. Every organization has rituals for moving ahead of one kind or another. And they're rarely analyzed for their impact on the ethical behavior of the people they work with. To me, one of the most powerful and important duties of leadership in an organization is to see to it that people avoid these kinds of choices making when they're growing their careers. It's pretty hard. We have a culture of little games we play in our careers going forward. The bottom line, though, was out of this particular exercise, I learned a couple of really important things, one of which I call the ethical expectations of leadership. And as you watch big cases like the Volkswagen play out, it's following the typical pattern I'm talking about here. But we studied employees, we studied customers, and we asked them essentially, okay, so this company got serious problems, they're real, people are being prosecuted, they're probably going to prison. It was kind of the order of what would it take for you to keep doing business with this company? And I wound up calling it the ethical expectations of leadership, but what they talked about was how they felt the leadership in an organization should behave. And I'm telling you this because we all stand by leaders in these situations. Here's what they said, in the order they said them. Find the truth as soon as possible and talk about it. There's 7 of these. Second, promptly raise tough questions and answer them thoughtfully and promptly. Vocalize core business values and ideals constantly. I made the observation that most core values in companies actually are what I call 19th hole exercises. A bunch of the guys, most of the guys still, are out, on an outing, and they start talking about vision, values, and stuff for the company. And so when they get to the 19th hole, they sit down and start talking, and somebody says, write this down. This sounds good. So on Monday they hand it in to somebody, maybe in HR, and by Thursday we have plaques on the wall. Bizarre. Walk the talk. Help, expect, and enforce ethical leadership. Be a cheerleader, model, and teacher of ethical behavior. But here's the kicker. Clearly convey that core values matter as much as profits. Words to live by. And life is in my experience, it's really just a series of patterns repeating themselves. People say, well, it must be really interesting. It is interesting what I do, but it's more like Groundhog Day. Because one of the questions I get asked when I'm at this age is, what new kinds of crises have you seen in your long career? And the answer is none. Unless somebody slipped in an 11th commandment that I missed somehow, they're still breaking the same 10 in the same way every single day. Very interesting. Still with me? Cool stuff, don't you think? Very interesting stuff. The key to being a crisis manager and being, I think, a good advisor is recognizing this sort of feature. Everything happens in a pattern that occurred to somebody else before it occurred to your organization. I forget where I learned this, it's been so long, but I used to, in the old days before computers and that sort of thing, I used to have files where I had hundreds of file folders called war stories. These were just scenarios of problems that happened that I thought could happen to my clients and that sort of thing. I had hundreds of these things. And now they're all on computers. If you go to my website, you actually go on the home page, you'll see a box on the left-hand side that talks about experience. And there are 22 categories of experience, and each one of those that you push on, there's 30 or 40 specific examples of some incident that I worked on in my career. Very interesting. I have it because it's a good resource for people to think about these things when they're doing crisis preparation, to think about things. It's a pattern. It's happened before. And it's going to happen again. Questions about this? I'm talking a long time. I want to shift gears for a second now and talk a little bit more about being a trusted advisor, being listened to. And almost any circumstance in which we're talking now, I mean, as you read the paper, I'm hoping you're going to read the paper differently than you have in the past. It's useful to look at these model behaviors, model circumstances, because they tend to repeat themselves. But before I do that, I'm supposed to talk about crisis this afternoon, so let me just for a moment talk about crisis-proofing your organization. And because I think this ties together many of the things that I've talked about already. And it's kind of cool stuff. Let me define crisis for you. There are many definitions, but I define crisis as a people-stopping, show-stopping, product-stopping, reputationally redefining event that creates victims and or explosive visibility. People-stopping, show-stopping, product-stopping, reputationally redefining event that creates victims and or visibility. I would say 90% of all the problems that happen that we could call crises don't get any visibility because there's just nobody there to talk about it. The media can only cover so much. And sometimes in your market, somebody has worse news than you do that particular day. I hate the phrase crisis management. Actually, I don't know why I do. It's to make a living at it. But to me, crisis management is a phrase that was invented maybe 30 years ago now by PR people to get FaceTime with the boss, basically. Let's scare them today and see how much money we can get. After 9/11, a new word came on board, which is the one I think you really want to think about, and that word is readiness. Crisis management is a PR term. Readiness is a management term. And you can tell the difference in reaction management. When you talk about crisis management, the first reaction you get is, we're not going to have crisis around here. We don't have crisis. We're smart people. We can handle anything. Come on. That's required by law to prepare. We don't, come on. Or they take it as a direct insult. And what do you think it is I'm going to fumble and bumble here? That's what we're preparing for. Or my favorite phrase, now Jim, we can't prepare for everything, right? Death by question, death by negative observation. But readiness is different. Readiness is, first of all, it's a constructive concept. And we can be on the same wavelength talking about readiness. So as you think about this in your own life and in your own advising, if you really want to get management's attention on this for more than 30 seconds, talk about readiness. And talk about how we can improve readiness. One of the ways we improve, for example, is we try to have drills and simulations. Some are required by law, but many aren't. I believe in announced drills, for example, way in advance. Everybody has a role in that scenario, or whatever scenario we're rehearsing. They get their information on their roles delivered to them with the announcement of the drill. They're expected to study this stuff and be prepared to do it appropriately when the simulation problem occurs. And I don't much care when the date is set for these things. I mean, crises are managed by the people who survive or show up, or both. And we even offer remedial classes for people. Because sometimes you don't do drills for a year. See, the goal in my judgment for drills is not to find out what we don't know, it's to find out what we do know, so we can then decide how we can be more ready by learning other stuff. Because if you want to find out what we don't know, that means you're going to catch people making mistakes. And any manager will tell you, look, my days are bad enough without you creating me looking stupid and another venue yet, you know. It's one of the reasons they don't come to these things, because we use them to tear people down. Crisis exercises, things of this importance, should be used to build the organization up and demonstrate their real value to everybody who's involved in responding. There are some metrics. These are Lukaszewski numbers, but 75% of readiness, in my opinion, is knowing how to find people. More time is wasted because we don't know where to get a hold of people. 75%, in my estimation, of readiness is knowing where the people are who are going to help respond to whatever the given situation happens to be. I budget usually 45 minutes to 60 minutes trying to find one person. If 4 people are missing, we have people who should be responding on the phone or someplace on the web trying to find people. For the key people in the organization, there should be what I call a whereabouts process. The really key people we need to know where they are all the time. There's a thing called pre-authorization. One of the reasons, by the way, why you do drills is to find out things you could authorize in advance. So you don't have to wait and have a meeting for somebody to come, you know, back from town somewhere or a meeting to decide if we can spend $500,000 or $50,000 or move something or change something or close something. All exercises generally reveal decisions you can make in advance reliably, and therefore people are enabled to act promptly. 15% pre-authorization. Scenario preparation. All crisis planning is scenario-based. There's no such thing as general crisis preparedness. It's just not memorable enough. You have to pick problems, pick scenarios, and practice specific to those scenarios. And then that adds up to 98%. Scenario preparation is 8%. That leaves 2% for total surprise, because that's what makes it a crisis, folks. It's just total surprise. Interesting things about crisis. 95% of all crises that fit my definition occur in the course of doing business. Whatever you're doing, the crisis is going to be caused by something you're doing in the normal course of your activity. If you fly airplanes, some of them take off well, some of them don't, some of them land well, some of them don't. Whatever business you're in, 95% of what's going to happen to you that would be a victim-creating circumstance and be characterized as a crisis, you actually know about and can deal with and prepare for. And here's the thing. These kinds of circumstances have very little risk to your reputation. Mostly because you know, there are smart people around who know how to handle these things. You get them under control, resolve the issue, and it tends to go away. It's not going to be a big problem. But there's this other pesky 5%, which I call non-operating issues, that are the things that really get you in trouble. This is criminal behavior. It's angry people, neighbors, patients, clients, whatever. People who are emotionally charged or affected by what's going on. And when you're talking about preparing for things, these are the things we're interested in preparing for, the non-operating problems, because they are such a great threat to your reputation and the practical continuation of your business. When you're choosing what to prepare for, there are 3 criteria I use, very easy ones. Likelihood of occurring on some metric, it doesn't matter what it is, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, something like that. The impact if it should occur, and its collateral damage potential. So when we're talking about what we're preparing for, you have a reason for talking about what you're preparing for. It has high scores in all those areas. In some areas, for example, on the West Coast, earthquakes that create victims are really relatively rare, but we still prepare for them because they're so devastating when they occur. And over time, I've developed a kind of series of reality check statements. I've already mentioned one. I mentioned that speed beats smart every time. Another one I like is bad news always ripens badly. One of the greatest, most important things you fight in moving through these processes with leadership is their unstinting optimism in their ability to resolve these problems. I think the optimism is probably well placed. The problem is it needs to be placed later in the transaction, because it always gets worse before it gets better. It always gets worse. You're always reliably, when somebody says, "How are we doing?" It's going to be worse tomorrow. You're going to be right 90% of the time. Your response is going to be criticized by people who weren't there, quoting other people who weren't there either. And we are the worst offenders. Look in the paper and see who's criticizing. The most common criticism of crisis response is what? They didn't act fast enough. Well, that's like saying, you can hear the bullet when it's fired, and if you're really smart, you can jump out of the way and not be hit by the bullet. I mean, think about it. Crises happen instantaneously. You can even say explosively, but they're remediated incrementally. You can never act fast enough. It's just not possible. The real damage doesn't come, to be negative about it, doesn't come from not acting. The real damage comes from not talking. And one of the beauties of social media these days is we don't have to write a press release anymore. We can put out 140 characters. And here's the problem it solves. And this is why CEOs lose their jobs. Have the best reasons of all for not talking about things. We don't know enough, we have enough data, whatever the reason happens to be. The cops told us not to talk, whatever the reason is. When you start to talk, there is no logical explanation for why you remain silent. We had these breach situations with credit cards in the last couple of years. Well, if you were involved in one of these things, the first people you met were people from the Treasury Department, the FBI, the Secret Service, and sometimes the CIA. Uniform advice from all these people: be quiet, don't say anything. What's the reason? Well, because if you talk, in normal criminal behavior, they can tune their stories up and they can beat our prosecution or capture these people. All that sort of stuff. And we want to be free to gather information without having people hound us about that sort of thing. But here's the problem. Somebody's bank account is empty right now, and you're not talking. I got bills to pay, and you're not talking. You can't survive that. There is no excuse for not talking. You cannot not talk. Target, I'm in Minneapolis for Target headquarters, they're in the second year of recovering from the huge problems they had, still working, but in the 2-year process, they have fired every senior official in the company. The board is this is how angry shareholders got. If they're flushing out the entire board, I think by the end of this year, they'll have replaced the entire board of directors. That's the angriest reaction I've seen, but they've been the one that hurt the most people directly. When you go to Target, in Minnesota at least, where we read about it every day, your tendency is to use cash, not use a credit card. Your tendency is actually to go someplace other than Target as well. But the main reason was the people who knew didn't talk for 9 days. Why? Because some guy with a gun and a badge says, don't talk. Sometimes we got to think differently when victims happen. And when they began to talk about this stuff and make these nonsense excuses, the not talking part in this case is actually, it's 1950s law enforcement. Because in the 1950s, when the guy robbed your bank, chances are he lived in the neighborhood, he needed some money to get through the weekend, he walked into the bank, wrote the robbery note on the back of his deposit slip, and he gets arrested. But you know, when the problems come from China and from Japan and from South America, they're not reading their newspaper. They don't care what you talk about. But your customers, your patients, the people you deal with, people who trust you, do. Very interesting these days. And as I said, most of us wind up making criticizing these sorts of things. You know, the fact is, too, your response can be operationally perfect on every score, but if you bungle the communication part of it, it's always remembered for being, you know, a stumble, fumble, mumble, bungle job. In this case, communication is just extraordinarily important. I mentioned in my definition the word victims. I want to talk about that for a minute because I wrote a book about that too. It seems to me that victims always get lost in what we do in these things. So understanding victims is really integral to understanding whether it's a crisis or not. Remember, the definition creates victims and/or explosive visibility. Victimization in this country is very heavily studied. We do know a lot about it, we just don't apply it the way we should. So let me talk about it for a few minutes, because I think there's a major lesson to learn from today. It's this aspect of crisis. Victimization sort of has three parts. There are three kinds of victims, first of all, three kinds of victims: people, animals, living systems. People, animals, living systems. That's what the news is about. Everything else is just filler. People, animals, living systems. And when I talk about victims, you know, millions of people get hurt around the world every single day. And they don't wind up in somebody's newspaper, somebody's blog, somebody's tweet, somebody's television show. And that's because I work in many cultures, not every culture, but in the cultures I work in, you know, when something happens to somebody, the general reaction is, you know, once they're knocked down, you know, and they kind of get it back again, their goal is to get up. And on the way up, they're thinking about things like, you know, can I get dinner done? Can I get the kids home from school? You know, can I get to work tomorrow? Vast, vast majority, you know, heavily injured people. This is what they're thinking about, getting their life back together again. But there is a very tiny number of people who, as they get to their knee, they reach in their pocket for the world, which today we call a cell phone, and they look for things like a support group, a lawyer that specializes in this kind of injury, a television station, somebody to talk to about their problem, because they're going to get even or get what's coming to them as they get up off the ground. This is a very small number. This is really important because one of the reasons for not preparing for things I hear constantly is, you know, all these situations are caused by a handful of people. You know, if there were a lot more people, we'd be more concerned. But the lesson of victimization, the first lesson of victimization is that a victim is potentially the most powerful person in your vicinity. We'll talk about why that's true. They have real power. And we tend to act toward these people very callously. We'll talk about that too. And it's interesting, though, to think about and talk about what causes victimization as communicated. It's kind of interesting. Victimization is predominantly a communications problem. What I mean by that is we victimize people by the way we talk to them, by the way we behave toward them. I published a list of 37 common victimization activities. There is assault on the list. There is bullying on the list. But most people can heal from assault. Bullying is like 6% violent, and you know the balance is just verbal stuff. But on the list are words like insulting, demeaning, degrading, discrediting, These are things that victimize people, just as much as if you hit them in the mouth. And the thing about words is that words are remembered. You know that phrase, sticks and stones hurt your bones, but words will never hurt you? Most victimization is caused by the language we use and how we describe things to people. And some of it is, I mean, all of it in a sense is incredibly memorable. I think it's sort of hard to imagine. In my experience, actually, one of the most powerful and permanent victimizations is caused by people losing their jobs in every culture, being fired, being laid off. It's, I mean, if you've been laid off, you know what I'm talking about. At some point every day, you think about what your boss said to you at that moment. Somehow it seems we just never really get beyond remembering this particular circumstance. There are lots of other worse things than that can happen to you. We tend to get beyond those, but just for whatever reason, culturally, losing work is, you know, a powerful, powerful problem. When we're talking about doing layoffs and cutbacks, I walk through this discussion with the people making the decision. You know, probably not going to change the decision, but at least, no, we're less worried about making the number now and worried about the damage it's going to cause to other people who are hurting because of the decisions we make. I think the only time I ever got fired in my entire career was I was working with a new company, growing like crazy. They had some issues. And then they hired a new CEO, and he came in, and I only met him once. And he lived in Denver, and I lived in New York. And he sent me an email, you know, write me information for employees. We're laying 600 people off on Monday. So 600 people. This company's growing so fast, we had 650 openings. So I spent part of Saturday talking to people about how we could transfer some of these people from one place to another. And so when I responded to him on Sunday afternoon, I sent him a 2-page email about how we could, you know, do this in a very humane way and solve some other problems in the company. He writes back Monday morning, 5-word email, you're not on my team. See, as smart as I am, I missed the big cue when they hired him. He was hired to sell the company, not build it. So I got fired. He's no longer working in that field anymore anyway, that's another story. Victims suffer from things we can understand. They suffer from 3 things that I talk about that affect us as communicators and as resolvers of issues. The first thing they suffer from is what I call intellectual deafness. What I mean by that is, I mean, we're all adults in this room, which means we've all been victimized by somebody or something in our lives. With the number of people here, there's at least 5 people in this room who are being victimized as we speak about something. And typically when this happens, you know, most of us have 2 voices. Some of you may have more, but most of us have 2. This inner voice and the outer voice. Inner voice talks to us about what's going on in our lives, but nobody can hear it, okay? And usually, if you're having a problem, this is the voice, the first voice to kind of like rag on you, right? You're a grown woman, you know this could have happened, you're pushing the limits, now see what you've done. It's like, wait a minute, you were my friend 6 minutes ago. And then part of victimization is talking about it. You have to talk about it with people. Total strangers, you know. Can't believe how stupid, you're on the elevator with somebody in the hotel, you know. Can't believe how stupid I was this morning. You know, people just want to get off the elevator, don't know what's going on with this person. And if your inner voice is working, at the same time your outer voice is working, nothing's coming in. And the result of that is the second syndrome of victims. Everything's a question. Why me? Why now? Why wasn't I warned? Who's responsible? Why didn't they do something? The questions are almost totally predictable. The frustration for us is we answer the questions because we're good people, good companies, good circumstances, but you even meet some of these people and talk to them. But you know, you have a wonderful conversation over a cup of coffee at 10 o'clock, and at 2 o'clock they have a press conference calling you the greedy buggers that you are. You say, well, coffee went well, what happened in between? The answer is nothing happened at the coffee and nothing happened in between because they weren't listening to you. They couldn't listen to you. One of the biggest frustrations in management when these things occur is, why won't this woman shut up? No, how many ways can we answer her question? How long do we have to answer this question? Why can't we stop today? The answer is you stop answering when they stop asking. They can't help themselves. The other part of being a victim is this 24/7 preoccupation with what's going on. This is where the power actually comes from. Most of us who are not victimized, it's a normal day for us. It's just another problem sort of thing. If you're a victim, think about yourselves. For a while, this is your life. This is you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is really where the power comes from. They're constantly on this. Can't they get a life? I mean, how many times can they bring this up? And the answer is, until it stops bothering them, or you do something that matters to them from their perspective. And there are things we can do. 4 things victims need. 4 things victims need. First thing a victim needs is validation. I'm not making this up. This did happen to me. I'm suffering as a result, and nobody's doing it. I'm alone with this. And if you're viewed as a perpetrator and you fail to validate, they'll find somebody who will. That's what support groups are for. That's what the media is for. And these people make terrific media because they're so emotionalized. On television, they just pound through. You want to cry. Second, they need visibility. They want to talk about their pain and their suffering. They want to talk about who caused it. But the interesting thing is, their talk about you as the perpetrator is really incidental to their need to talk. And you say, well, Jim, this is irrational. This whole plot is irrational. And the answer is, now you're getting it. It is totally irrational. And we screw up because we use totally rational means to try and help these people do things that they can really, in a sense, only help themselves doing. And the things they really need, we refuse to do. Validate, help them be visible. The third one, my favorite, well, not my favorite, is vindication. So you change some procedure in your company to prevent this from happening to other people. And who puts out the press release? You do. So these people are saying, well, no, if this problem had happened to me and they weren't so stupid, they wouldn't, I'm the one who got them to do it. For some reason, we just can't do that. It must be a guy thing, I'm not sure, although women executives do it too. This is the thing where, no, this has been in our planning stage for probably at least the last 18 months or so, blah, 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 blah. You just can't say, we're going to call this, the Brown solution because we hurt the Browns to learn getting this done. Sometimes it's so interesting, it's just sort of frustrating. I have to ask people leaders making these decisions, say, what would your mother do if you were in this room right now and you talked about this, after she slapped you alongside the head? Some of this stuff is so elementary. Now, the fourth thing, that's 3 out of 4, okay? You can do all of those. Fourth is the A word, apologize. I define apology as the atomic energy of empathy. When you apologize, bad things start to stop, primarily litigation. I mean, ironically, there's nothing they can ask more of you than an apology. And when you listen to victims and survivors talk, they're generally not, even if they're suing you, not in it for the money. They'll dispute that. The lawyers say you got to have a big number to get the visibility we need, blah, blah, blah. But I don't care about the money. I just want somebody to own up to having done this to me and my family. These words are spoken every single time. It's almost never about the money. Now, we see apologies constantly. And most apologies are really not apologies. There's actually a form for apologies. It has 5 basic parts. The first one is an admission that you've done something that hurt or harmed people, animals, living systems, one, some, or all 3. This is where the lawyers go a little crazy, because it is an admission. So it's a legal admission. Second step is the explanation step. You have to explain what it was you did, so that the victims can understand that you really realized what you caused. Third step is to explain how you're going to change what you do to prevent this from happening to other people, other animals, other systems, whatever. Okay? The fourth step in the process is offering some kind of compensation. My Catholic version says this is the penance step. Okay? You're going to pay in some way. And the fifth step is a request for forgiveness. Some kind of acknowledgement that you're being forgiven. It's the asking that matters, whether it actually happens or not. Why this is so hard, I don't know. But something you can spend an afternoon talking about whether we should apologize, the sides of apology. What I know is that apologies are free. They're always on time, whenever they come. And they have this extraordinary power to stop things. Just to give you some evidence, laws are being, there are laws on the books in 19 states, maybe I think it's 19 states, that prevent juries from using voluntary apologies at car accidents for awarding damages. 22 states have laws involving healthcare workers. When they voluntarily apologize, 2 things will not happen. 1, juries cannot use that as a reason for upping the damage award. And second, in half the states, an insurer cannot alter your professional practice insurance as a result of a voluntary apology in the healthcare city. Very interesting what's going on here. It's just kind of a trend. The insurance companies have learned that apologies are really powerful. Apologies stop bad things from continuing. And mostly it's litigation related. When you sort of box it up like this, it seems pretty simple to do, but this is one of the more complex things we have to deal with in crisis. And one of the most interesting. By the way, I have all this written down. If you'd like copies of these things, just leave your business card up front. I'll send you a selection of articles that further discuss the topics we talked about today, because we're pretty close to time if we're not over a little bit. You're also quiet. Is this useful? Is this helpful? How much time we got?
Well, really none.
Pardon? Well, let me ask you a couple of questions, okay? What's the most important or interesting thing you learned today? Anybody? Most important or interesting thing you learned? Say again?
Speed beats smart. I like that.
Okay. What else? I'm sorry?
3-minute drill.
Yep.
Point out there and, don't see them.
Right.
Crisis readiness. I like the way you
Raise your hand when you talk.
Oh.
Yes.
Crisis readiness. Readiness. I like
Yeah. You have not on my website, go to my website, e911.com. Sign up there, I have a newsletter that comes out. We're just revising the website, it'll be new up in December, but go to this one. Tons of stuff on there. All these things are there. Very, very interesting.
Any questions? Good.
We have presents.
I want to thank Jim for coming, and we would have him stay longer, but he does have to catch a plane. But I did want to make sure that we give away these fabulous books that he has written, and if you didn't put your business card in the bowl yet, You've got 12 seconds to do it now. But we want to give it away. And if you pull my name out, I'm not a winner, because I did throw it in just to make it look like there was business cards in there to start with. And of course he did. Oh, no, you didn't. You did. You're good. I just recognized the card.
Cass Wyatt?
Cass Wyatt. She always wins.
Yep, she is.
You have a choice of books. That was the benefit of being the first pull. I think we need that one, Cass. I agree. And for our second book, this one's for your CEO, or what you're going to try to teach him. Robin Langton. Did she just step out? Oh, what's the deal here? Is it got to be present to win? Let's vote. Okay, present to win. Sorry, Robin. Don't tell her. Shh. All right. Diane. All right. Well, I just want to make a quick reference on November 5th. We are going to be having a members meeting. So if you're a member of the chapter, we will be doing our annual meeting. Of course, anyone's welcome to come. Just give me a call if you're interested. But we will be doing our vote for our slate of officers, and that meeting will be held at V Bentley. So if you have questions about that and you're not a board member, or excuse me, you're not a chapter member, just let me know. Chapter members should have gotten an invitation, so we will be doing our slate of officer vote at that time. And we'll let you know when our next meeting. We don't have one on the calendar yet. We're considering the holiday mixer thing, so we'll let you know how that works out. I want to thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it, and Jim was a great resource, and he's absolutely very available to you. He's mentioned that to us earlier. Email him, contact him. Definitely check out his website if you haven't yet. There's lots of resources to be found there. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you joining us today.